So, hi Sam, thanks for joining us today. How's things?
Oh, yeah, all right. I feel like my kids have literally just gone back to school today after 2.5 weeks school holidays. So I'm partly just like relieved and just also like, what just happened? So
I know,
always
and do you find there's a part of you that really love the holidays?
Yeah, I have grown to love the holidays. When my kids were smaller, I actually, to be honest, I really hated the holidays. I found it hard. I mean, I think because I just had, because I get up at 6
5
a.m.
o'clock.
and need me. And, now I kind of have teenagers. I still have a 10-year-old who does that a little bit. Like, we're all just sleeping in and they're making their own food for lunch. Like, I'm not having to entertain them and make them food. So from that point of view, it actually does feel like a holiday. So I enjoy it a bit more. But just after 2 weeks, I end up like in some kind of parenting spiral around knowing they've watched way too many screens and have pretty much been eating donuts for 2 weeks or something. So then I'm like, because like at school, we're like on the clock, but out of
Yeah,
school,
yeah,
we
yeah.
let it go.
And
And
it's
then,
amazing, even the different food you'd want to do, isn't it? Like when they're at school, you've got these lovely meals.
yeah,
When they're at
yeah.
home, you go, oh, let's just have
I
whatever,
know, you
takeaway,
just like, I'm
chicken,
checking
macas.
out. I'm on holidays as well,
I'm
which
on
means
holidays. Yeah, mine are all in their
fend
20s,
for
but I
yourself.
I remember like, oh guys, just do whatever.
I know, which is
Go
fine.
get
But
a
yeah,
job.
after 2 weeks, I am like, I don't think this is good. Like, I
Yeah.
think we need some structure in our lives again.
And mine are all, there's no school holidays for me anymore. And I actually miss it now because it was
Mm,
that time where I could go, well, let's plan something now because they're
yeah,
old enough, right? Let's go here. Let's get out of the winter and go, Fiji or Queensland or
yeah.
wherever. And now I'm like, oh, they're all on their own holidays. I've got to pay for the holidays now if they want to come with me.
I
It's not,
know. It's
it's
like,
not the free under 12s. It's
it
now
is
the every.
true. I know. I
Yeah,
think
it's
about
amazing how
that.
much your kids love you when you're paying for a holiday.
Yeah, I know. I am thinking about my eldest. She finishes school next year. And I was like, and she asked me, she's like, so when I'm finished school, like, if you guys are going away, like, are you paying for me or am I paying for me? And like,
They're on to
she's
it.
already
See.
thought about it. And I'm like, and you're right. Maybe the only way I'm ever going to get to have a holiday with her again is that I'm going to actually have to pay. I'm like, I don't know if you'd pay to have a holiday with me. You probably want to do that with your friends.
Yeah, it is, and you think about it, don't you? You think, oh, how many holidays do you do with your parents?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And would you
it's
actually pay money to do that versus pay money to go with your friend? I don't. Oh my goodness,
it's
the whole
that's a
podcast
whole
on
new
that, Paula. The
podcast.
whole podcast of that.
There is holidays and children.
Yeah.
Oh, but
Anyway.
look, what we've been doing, we ask our guests about their journey into early education and care, and we'd love to hear about your journey. What started you off to do Parent TV?
Yeah. I'm always like, do you want the long story or the short story? I'll try and keep it as
In
snappy
the
as
middle. We
possible.
don't need short. We like a bit of a chat because people are very curious about what motivated you to do this. It's a big thing.
Yeah, no, it is actually a really big thing. And the more I'm in it, the more I'm like, holy dooly, this is like really important. Um, So my background was like community development, human services kind of stuff back in the day when I went to uni and didn't have children. Um, and then I actually had my first child at 24, which is young, but also not young. It's still all just, a thing. And at that point, I've always been pretty entrepreneurial. And my mind is just very busy, always thinking about things and doing things. And um, that's when Facebook was kind of starting. So this is going back like 16 years.
Yeah, about yeah,
Or something, 15 years. And I ended
yeah.
up being home with her and, yeah, just playing a Reddit on Facebook, ended up starting a community on there for kind of parents. And over 8 years, that grew to about 650,000 parents. So that's all pretty wild in and of itself, and ended up turning into a full-time job with a few kind of staff around that. And in that time, I had another child. I have three. I don't know if I had my son by then, but at some point I did. So yeah, I had this wild kind of 10 years of online community building, like in the parenting space, parenting education and content. And after doing that for as long as I did that, I did start to realize that I didn't know if I wanted to keep doing that because I just started to think maybe this isn't actually helping us that much.
Yeah.
And the internet being the places and spaces that we go to get information on child development and parenting and all of that, like it's too much of a choose your own adventure, and it's hard to know what's real and not real. And you have lots of people who have lots of influence who actually don't understand child development and research, but maybe had a few kids, and that's who everyone's listening. There's some dangers in some of that. And I think I just really got to see that. And that's where I actually decided to step out of that kind of influencer blogger parenting space, though I knew a lot, and actually start Parent TV. So really the vision for Parent TV was to create a brand and a space online that had credible information from credible sources around child development and parenting and those kind of things, because it is just, I think, really challenging for parents and a very big choose your own adventure. And that's kind of where that all kicked off about 8-9 years ago. So, we work with some of the leading childcare educators in Australia. Like anyone who knows anyone in Australia in the childcare field would know, Dr. Kayleen Henderson and Sandy Phoenix and Teacher Tom and Maggie Zent and Nathan Wallace. Like they're all the people who we work with. And we also know that people kind of watch videos. So I decided it would be a video streaming platform, that all the content would be delivered kind of in short, sharp videos. So we have about 2,000 videos on the platform, all that go for about 5 to 10 minutes.
Wow.
That are just answering the questions educators and parents are asking. And we've now working with like occupational therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, protective education specialist, you kind of name it. So nearly anything you could possibly think of in terms of the allied health field and sector. Dr. Billy Garvey, we've worked with identifying, supporting kids with developmental concerns. We have content now on the platform that, I just say, think of it as a tool of like a really big library. And I feel like what we offer parents, educators and childcare centres with that is efficiency and credibility. So a lot of that information you can find if you've got lots of time.
Yes, the time is the key, isn't it?
To go through the internet and try and figure out what's real and not real. But that actually costs you a lot, that time. Like time is of the essence, particularly in centres with parents working. And so really,
that's right. And also as an educator in a centre, you don't have time. As a centre manager, you don't have time. Providers aren't thinking about that necessarily at that level. I mean, they are, but they've got time as well. Then you've got parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they'll just listen to their friends. They'll be on those chats on Facebook and things like that, right? Trying to solve the problems that they're experiencing, but not necessarily from credible sources.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm coming to learn, and I believe it more and more as I see it, is like the environments with which we're raising our children in now are environments that have never existed to raise children. And this is to do with things like technology, and the impacts of those and what is happening to our kids is so great. No one actually your parents, your cousins and aunties, they don't know what's going on. Their experience is so different from what is actually
happening
right now, that they have no reference point. And they might know some things that are really helpful, like it's good for kids to play outside. That's a universal truth that will always be true. Like, but there's other stuff, the nuance of stuff that's happening, and it's like, and information is coming out of universities. It is coming, like studies are happening, things are happening. We are understanding more about child development and what this stuff means. And, our goal is to get that information to people as quick as possible. And it's very hard to actually do that just following random people online who have opinions about parenting. It's like, actually what's happening right now for our kids is so much bigger than that. And we do really need to educate ourselves and find out about this, because the impact of that with their mental health, and like we're just seeing it down the line play out in scary ways for our kids, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know I was reading something a while back about in my era, like in the 70s, 80s, we were outside. Yeah. The line of sight for a parent for a child was about 1 kilometre. the freedom of that, right? And you don't think a kilometre is that far, really, but if you think about where your child could be in that kilometre, there's a lot of it. Where it's literally sight of eye, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Within
yeah.
sight,
Line of sight or something.
line of
Yeah.
sight, yeah, line of sight, which is literally what 20 meters, if
Yeah.
that. Not even 20. It would be 10.
Yeah. And what people don't realize about that, sorry, you can keep going, but
No, you go. It's your podcast. So I'm just throwing things in here.
No, I love it. So I hear you say that it's such an issue. What people don't realize about that is, though, what they think, what a parent might think, or educator's different if kids in your care, like you do need to see what's going on. But from a parenting point of view, and I know lots of educators, probably parents too.
Absolutely.
Even though as the parent, the logical thing to think is, well, I'm doing my job, making sure that my child is safe so that I have my eyes on them. Yes. At what point, though, from a child development point of view, does that child need to learn some agency and have confidence built within them that they have the capacity to help and solve some problems for themselves and their own ability to get places? Like at some point and that's happening later and later. And what that's building in our kids, the later and later it's taking for us to put some of that responsibility onto kids and take some of those risks is, yes, we might be in theory keeping our kids safer from bad things happening. But what we're also doing is building within them a belief that they are not capable of doing that for themselves and they need a parent to do that. So that we're actually building a lack of confidence and a lack of agency. And we're actually like kids who are not capable, because what we're saying to them by not letting them is, you are not capable, you need me.
Or you're not good enough.
Or you're not good enough, or you don't have those skills. Like they get the skill by us taking the risk on letting them build the skill. If we never do that, then they don't learn that, then we actually set our kids up to have like inappropriate skills for the ages that they are not capable of engaging in developmentally appropriate activities and not being able to walk to the shops at the age of 12, you know. This might frighten people, but my daughter, who was in grade 7, so she was 11 or 12.
11, 12, yeah.
And my son, who was in grade 1, so the year above prep, you know, used to catch the bus home and walk, you know, 500 meters together and cross 2 roads, and he was 7. Like and they showed me that they were capable of doing that. I know the risk is that, sure, they could get hit by a car or they could blah, 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 blah. But I also know that my kids also are very capable, know how to problem solve stuff. And like I'm setting them up for life. And it's this fine line between, I know something bad could happen because I do that. And I've learned something really, really bad happens if I don't. And that's the long-term consequences. And we live in this like parenting context where we're wanting to reduce the short-term risk of stuff happening to our kids. And we don't know that through doing that, we're actually increasing the long-term risk of something equally as bad or maybe more bad happening to our kids. But because we don't see that risk, we ignore it. For me, it just comes down to child development. So how I've resolved, I'm really understanding what children need at what point in their journey, that if something was to happen to my child, yes, I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I knew the risk I was avoiding by allowing them to develop appropriately, which has risk. Like something could happen. Like that is life.
Life has risks, right? Life has risks.
And I think we're just
As I said, right down to your business. You know, you set up a business. That's a risk.
Yeah.
We need to have we don't want risk averse children. We want children to actually take risks that they have thought about.
Yeah.
They've got to think. It's about the thinking prior to
them
taking.
how to think. Yeah, right? Absolutely.
And that's the skill. I mean, I did the same as you. My son, my oldest son, at 6, I put him on the bus. I walked to the bus stop with him, but put him on the bus to school. But knowing at the other end there was someone there, but he went on a bus, a school bus with all ages. They all was all very supportive. I mean, I'm sure there was like stuff that went on a bus that we all know goes on school buses, but it is what it is. But it was just that. I mean, he was so proud of himself.
Yeah.
But I had to plan that. I had to prep him. We had to do a practice. We did a run through. So it's the prepping and the thought process.
Yeah.
When either you or I are not sitting here saying just throw your children out in the street and go come back at lunchtime.
Yeah.
Right? It's about that, your expectation, your boundary, and that they understand that they need to come back and say this went wrong or this went, or I don't feel safe, I need to call my mum. Whatever it is, that they have to ask for the help rather than we making it safe for them.
Totally. This is what Teacher Tom, if anyone in the childcare sector who thinks this is interesting, I'm like, just go look at Teacher Tom's work. His work is all about, he's in Seattle and like a well-known childcare
and what's his name?
Educator. Teacher Tom.
Teacher Tom.
You've never heard of Teacher Tom, Paula?
No.
Oh, he's like a super...
You have to share the link.
Yeah. Like, he talks a lot about the risk stuff. He has a center that he runs in Seattle in the US. I think he's been over once. Like, they flew him over to speak at the Australia Childcare Alliance conference because we filmed with him when he was over for that. And so that's kind of how I first caught wind of him, I think. And Maggie's good friends with him too. Like,
Maggie Dent's amazing. Like, serious. She's just got that way.
But the risk stuff and teaching kids how to think, like, it isn't just get outside and I won't see you. It's before they going, all right, let's just scenario a few things that could happen. Like, what would you do? And also being here's some ideas. But that's building agency and capacity in our kids. I mean, I kind of know we're talking about 0 to 5s right now. So some of this stuff is probably a little bit further down the line, but it does start in 0 to 5 with things like letting our kids use knives. And, maybe we're not letting them use the biggest, sharpest knife, but, we have those kitty cutters and we're like starting, when my son was 3 or 4 or 5, he was using the hammer to hammer in nails and we had cardboard. There was a process and so he hits his finger, he learns that there's consequences and that hurts. Like, our kids, what they know about those kids at young ages is when we don't let them take enough risks and actually hurt themselves, they never learn that there can be serious consequences to taking things too far. So what they're finding in boys that are teenagers is they actually don't have proper developed risk management. So when they're getting in things like cars, they haven't learned yet because back in those early years, they weren't given enough opportunity to take like reasonable risks that were not deadly, but like maybe they did break them. Maybe they did fall off the edge of the trampoline. Maybe they did. Like, it's not bad for our kids to actually harm themselves if it's not like
in
crazy serious because they go, oh my gosh, there is like limits and I need to think about limits because if I cross those limits, like then I can be harmed. So by the time they're becoming teenagers and they're completely rejecting their parents, we have not actually done our job in as making sure that they understand risk management and limits because we kept them safe thinking that was the best thing to do and that was their job as a parent when it's not. Short term you think it is, but long term the consequence of our kids not actually experiencing all of that is we've got a bunch of kids who have no resilience and have no risk management, and those two things together
and an increase in anxiety
like result in quite serious things for kids further down the line.
Absolutely. And look, and I find and in saying that, risks, even when you do safe risk taking and safe risk management, accidents happen. Accidents happen. We don't have that control over every part of our life. I mean, it can happen to any of us. So
Yeah.
even if as a parent, I remember letting my kids go, thinking big deep breaths, big deep breaths. I remember my older son got his P's, and I sent all my 3 children in the car with him. That was a scary moment because I thought, I've got my 3 kids in one vehicle.
Oh yeah, and like that is like just about to happen to us, Paula. My daughter gets her license, and she'll be driving my 3 kids to school as of September.
And you wait to get that. Where they
Oh my gosh!
They don't remember it. But I remember it. I remember it. It's ingrained in that moment where I've done enough. I trust my son to drive, and they were actually going away together. They were going actually to visit family, and I couldn't go. So they had it was an hour and a half drive ahead of them. So on a freeway, it was all of that stuff going on, but they were fine, right? But I know as much as he knew what he was doing driving, I had to put my trust in him that he wasn't going to be stupid, and that but something could still happen. I can't control the traffic.
Well, here's the other crazy part to that, even that we're learning from the research and a whole heap of stuff about kids and child development. When we speak to our children, and this is good for anyone to know, saying, I believe you've got this and that you're a really great driver and that you know how to keep yourself safe and you're going to do your best to keep yourself and your kids safe, that we create that reality for our children. If we come at our children like, don't speed and don't do anything dangerous and silly, and we actually come with a script that is telling them all of the negative things that could happen and what they're going to do, they are more likely to do those things because we have put that story of who they are and what they could do into their head. And if we give them the story of, this is who I think you are, and I think you're going to do a really great job of.
Absolutely.
Like, that's the story that they have. And so it actually matters. And even when kids are little, they know if you're trying to get a child to change their behavior, don't tell them the bad behavior that they're doing. Tell them the behavior that you want to see.
Absolutely.
Instead of going, why are you always leaving your towel on the ground? You need, it's like, it's really great when you hang your towel up after you're done. We hang our towels up after we're finished in the bathroom.
Yeah, they copy the behavior, right?
Well, yeah, and you're kind of like, and so it starts with kids when they're little, but often it's really hard for us to do that, not because we're bad people, but generally because that's what was done to us. Like, that's how people spoke to us. So we're just doing what was done to us, which is really natural, which is yelling at kids and telling them to stop doing whatever it is that they're doing because it's like a problem. And so
it's funny. I'm actually looking at our questions through this, and I think we're talking about.
Oh no, I know. Yeah, I looked at them.
Regardless, so it's quite good. And I was just looking at the stop yelling while I'm yelling at you when you were saying that.
Yeah,
it's exactly it.
It is exactly it. We it's really interesting. The more I look at child development stuff. So what I will say, the question you asked right at the start was, how did I get into childcare? We actually did parenting stuff for a little bit first with just parenting direct to parents with ParentTV, but really quickly into that journey, we realized that that the kind of childcare and early learning sector, with so many kids now being in care like full-time or a lot from really young ages, were actually the ones who were like bearing the brunt of the responsibility for a lot of the kind of input that was going into kids. And
that's
so
exactly right.
And
it's full-time care for most these days, right? So they're with their educator or their educators, their room leaders, more than they are really with mum and dad.
Yeah, and the more we come to understand about those, particularly those first 1,000 days, but I would even say those first 5 years, like they are the most important years of anyone's life in terms of their brain development and setting them up for the rest of their lives. So, I mean, in some ways, I feel like it's really intense saying this to educators, because it's kind of like, I don't know if I signed up for that, but it's like you are like,
You're it.
you're the most influential person in the lives of those kids. Like sometimes as much as parents, maybe I wouldn't say more than, but I would say nearly as much as, in that they could be spending more of their waking hours under your care than actually with their own parents. And the way that you are interacting with them and the environment that you're creating for them is like literally the most important work of like the world. What we do for our children and that environment that we create is creating the future generations. And that we now know that those first kind of 1,000 days really are 90% of the brain building blocks of what the future of that child is going to be. Like, it's kind of scary.
It is.
So when I learned that, looking at the work that I'm doing, I just went, you know what? If we want to really help, I think spending some time trying to support this sector in terms of helping them understand who children are and what they need and how to set up environments that are really going to help them thrive long term is a good decision to make in terms of our time and energy. So,
and I suppose it comes back to that. We really are living now. It takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah,
we all have a role to play in the way our children 0 to 5 see, view, learn from the world outside them. While their parents, earn income to feed, house, clothe, care, educate, all of those important things that we have to do.
Absolutely.
And look, and I suppose to give the context to our listeners, when you're looking at those short-term approaches in child development, we probably, there's a phrase that's familiar, is I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
That's really, I mean, I'm sure any of our audience here today listening have gone, oh, wow, I say that. We say it as a parent, we say it as an educator, we say it as a centre manager, and whoever it is. All of those things come back to, I don't have time.
So I think one of the absolute key things that I've learned, that if I could, I mean, firstly for me, if I could go back in time and have really known and felt this and have accepted it as truth for myself, for my kids and my parenting, but also educators and parents, the one thing that we need to know about child development and what kids need more than anything else to thrive is they need time. And the one thing that people will say across the board about the current environments that we are existing in and the demands that are on us is we don't have any time. We are so busy trying to do all the things that we don't have time. And unfortunately, the biggest thing that I can see that is harming our children is that they don't have a voice to be able to advocate for themselves around that need. Like, we as the adults have kind of forgotten that the biggest and most important thing is that children need time. That's their number one need. We don't have time. They can't really tell us that that's their need in a logical, adult, calm way. So they start to behave in ways that demand it from us in all the wrong ways because they're not getting it in all the right ways. And then we get angry at them for their bad behavior, and so, the one thing that I'm really starting to understand more than anything about child development and how we can really love and support our kids to be the best they can be is just to understand who they are and what they need. And who they are under, are humans who have not yet been developed into full adults, whose brains are, take 25 years to get to the point that they're able to function like with maturity. And the process of being born to getting there is loving and kind adults who understand that they are not small adults. They are actually children who are not capable of things like self-regulation and who need to be kindly and lovingly taught things. And unfortunately, that comes at the cost of time. And time is the thing that we all say we don't have. And that's the problem to solve, I think, for childcare, for parents, for everyone. Like, if I had any message, it's, if you can just really sit with what's happening, like for your center, for your home, if kids are in your care, like, don't go making big decisions about that straight away. Like, we need to sit with this and really make a plan around if what children really need is time to learn skills, to be able to function in ways that are not behavior that is stuff we don't want to see. They need a kind, loving adult to help them for quite a substantial period of time develop that skill, because it's not something that you wake up one day when you're 3 years old and because somebody yelled at you really loudly and scared the crap out of you, because you were being developmentally appropriate for the age, like, you're suddenly just going to stop doing that tomorrow. Like, or at the point that kid does stop doing it, it's out of sheer fear, if yelling and behavior management, via punishing children for being developmentally appropriate, is the way that we go about trying to change that. I don't know. I just see a bunch of kids who, that's what I see when I look out, when everyone's talking about the behavior crisis. I'm like, that's just a bunch of kids who haven't had adults who have had the time to help them, and they can't help themselves because they're children and they're really struggling, and they're,
And this is this village thing, isn't it? We don't look at, parents may not always have the answers. Parents may not always be capable of solving it. Parents, so rather than say, oh, where are the parents? What were they doing? Why are they so bad? Like, let's look at us as a society.
Yeah.
And how we can help a child or children. Doesn't matter what age, 0 to 5, 5 to 25.
Yeah.
Let's look at the way we as a society say how bad you are or how good you are, or the behavior society wants to see. That's, you
absolutely.
see that so much now. Where are the parents? Anything happens, where are the parents? It's like, sometimes we just can't always be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it is really understanding what everybody's needs are in the mix, and how do we best go about ensuring that everybody's needs are met. It doesn't work when parents just throw themselves under the bus too and don't meet any of their needs and just placate, in theory, the needs of the child. Like, that's actually not what a child needs. A child doesn't need you to meet all of their needs all of the time so they don't have any needs. Like, they'll want you to do that, and that will seem great. But what you've just done is not give that child any experience of not getting what they want, disappointment, pain. Like, kids need all those things. What they don't need is you getting angry at them when they're having a moment where they're really upset, angry, or disappointed because they're not getting what they want. As the adult, you don't have to give them everything they want, but also don't get angry at them. Like, it is a very normal human reaction to be angry and disappointed when you don't get what you want. Your job is just to be like, yeah, it really sucks when you don't get what you want. But still not getting it, and I love you. I'm not going to get angry at you about you having those feelings, and I'm happy to sit with you here in this until we ride it out. But yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? Like, that's it. It's like, but we really struggle with witnessing those feelings in our children because they trigger something in us. and we want to shut that down because it makes us uncomfortable, that's where it goes south. It's like all of those feelings are okay. And they'll actually pass quite quickly for that kid if you don't engage. But if you engage with anger, it's when they're angry, you are just fueling that fire as opposed to just letting it simmer out. And we get angry at our kids for having emotions that are unpleasant. And it's like, that's actually just what it means to be human. And we have them. And like we're having the emotion that they're having around their emotion, telling them to stop while we're angry. Like we're using anger to tell them to stop being angry. It's like, can somebody make sense of that for me? Because how is a kid ever going to learn to not be angry when they see when something happens that they don't like? When the parent is seeing them being angry and they don't like that and getting angry to get them to stop. Like we are essentially teaching them to behave like that because we're behaving exactly like them and we're in the lead.
Look, and I know everyone has very differing views on it, and I know it's against the law to hit children and things like that. But like I always say, I've just never smacked my children. That's just been one of my things. I've always had an issue with, why would I smack them? So if I was actually in the street and didn't like someone's behaviour, I wouldn't go up and smack someone in the street and say that's naughty.
Yeah.
And look, I know it's probably opening up a can of worms, but I don't mean to do that.
But it is interesting things. Like people don't realise that, we're expecting children to behave in ways that we as the adults are not behaving. Like it's wild to me.
I agree. I'm the same.
I'm like, we've got the like full blown like adult brain and children don't. And we want them to be regulated.
And we're not regulated.
And we're not regulated because they're not regulated. And we're like, they're mimicking us. Like whatever you're seeing in your kids is a direct mirror to what is you. And that is the scariest thing of all. And that's why it's so triggering for us. And, I say all of that going, the answer isn't to go into shame and blame about that and how terrible you are. That doesn't help. It is just to go, okay, that's not working. And clearly there's work I need to do on myself so that I don't get so upset when my child is upset or angry. So instead of trying to force them to change their behavior, I am like, the work is on us adults to actually be able to be the adult and hold space for them to learn how to deal with those emotions. But if we haven't learned how to deal with them, our kids will never learn how to deal with them. And so it's our work to do, it's not theirs.
Absolutely. And I know we're talking general here, there's parents, but if you think about it, right in a service, an educator, a team leader, whoever it is in that service at that time, they could also be not on point. They all might be having feelings that are upset or disappointed because something hasn't, they might have been told they haven't got a job that day, right?
Yep.
Or that I know they didn't do a checklist right, whatever it is. So they're dealing with that, and they're in this centre now with children who also have just left their mum or dads or caregivers, and the things that happen in a service in 5 minutes can also impact our educators and the way they deal with the children as well.
Yeah, it is exactly the same process for team dynamics as it is for this. Like it's all the same stuff. It's just the ability to be able to process, to acknowledge, accept feelings, and to be able to process it in appropriate ways. I think our expectation is that we just want people to not have them. Like the bar is, can you just be perfect? Can you just never have a problem? Can you just accept everything? And like the children, can you just be perfect? Can you just not? Can you just do what you're told? Can you just sit down when I say, can you just all do exactly what's meant to be done when it's meant to be done so that I don't have to deal with any of this? Like we don't want people to be human anymore. We want people to be little perfects. And that goes for teens as well.
Yeah.
But that's actually not human or healthy. Like that bar will eat you alive and will destroy people. It will destroy all of us. It's like we no longer show each other kindness and grace for just being human beings. It is about saying, it's about knowing what the rules and boundaries are. So there are some things, like there's a boundary there. So that behavior or that, like for staff, that behavior is just not appropriate. So if you go there, like, and that's about people being really clear on like what the rules and the boundaries are in a workplace.
Yeah.
And then calmly having conversations and enforcing them when they see someone maybe breach that or do something or head in that direction, be able to just have a calm conversation and say, can we talk this through? That is like the hardest work of all, because no one ever had that happen to them when they were kids. We were all just either burying our head in the sand, pretending that wasn't happening, or someone was screaming at someone so that it would stop doing that, or everyone was just gossiping about it in the backgrounds. Like, so, you know, part of it is, or all three, like this is hard work. I say this like it sounds calm and nice, and it is when you've created that environment, but to actually create that environment means everyone has to slow down, make a plan, know what the rules are, even for the kids. And then someone has to be the grown-up in the room who is responsible for holding us all kind of accountable to that, and just
right down to that 0 to 5-year-old.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just checking in, and when something's awry, just being curious, not angry. Tell me what was happening for you there. Like, how did that happen? Like, how can we support you so that doesn't happen again? Not you've done the wrong thing and that's not okay and you're out, or we're not going to talk about it, but everyone's just like,
we're going to ring your mum and suspend you.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, well, how did we get here and what do you need so that doesn't happen again? And just actually help each other with what we're struggling with, not expect each other just to be there. Like none of us are there. Oh gosh, I know. I need so much. I still need so much help. I'm like, our job is to help each other get to where we want to go and be compassionate and loving, not just, and yes, it is a bother. It is a bother when you have to help people sometimes and they're not where you want them to be. But you know what?
Sometimes and you're time poor. So we go back to I don't have time. But sometimes we need to make time to solve problems that are longer term, that have a longer term effect.
Yeah.
In fact, what you were talking about earlier with the educators and all of those things that go on at a centre level, the last time we've actually got to talk about is responsibility. Where does an intersection lie between families and early learning services, and how does someone in a centre and then parents at home manage that grey area, I suppose?
I think this is like one of the greyest areas of big problems that are emerging. It's the same in schools as well. My husband's actually a primary school teacher. This blurring of lines in terms of children and where some responsibility lies. Like in the past, the responsibility kind of for toilet training, I think, was more on parents and tying your shoelaces. And now I'm hearing all this, like, parents don't have time. So now they're like wanting centres to do all of that work, and centres are like, well, that wasn't really what we were meant to be doing. That was kind of or even emotional regulation, even teaching kids like around food, all those different things. So it is actually getting very blurry who's responsible for what when it comes to kids. And it's particularly a big issue in schools, because schools were historically there just to teach children, to educate children, reading.
Education, yeah.
My husband would tell you.
Education now is massive.
Oh, no, it's true. And then he's like, I have kids in half his kids in grade 5 can't read properly still, because he can't get to teaching them how to read because they're so emotionally dysregulated. Like, in order to be able to do that task, you need to be present to it. So if you're dysregulated and you can't focus, sit down, and there's kids fighting, and he can't even get to the task. And so year and year, they just it gets worse and worse for those kids, and they get more and more left behind because they haven't learned this skill of just being able to be present and regulated, because no one's been present and regulated their whole lives. We're all just like passing kids from one person to the next saying, it's your problem, you teach them that, I don't have time for this. Like,
and once again, it's a time.
No one's got time to actually help kids. And like those that, yeah. So with this responsibility piece, I don't know, I guess I would say to centres, I mean, this is just really big picture step back stuff, but I think it's the thing. Like, finding time and space away from the crazy busy of the day, like as the leadership team or even as your team, to really sit and go, who are we as a centre? Like, what are our rules? Like, what do we want to be for these kids? How can we really help these parents? But what do we also need to be really clear on about what we are taking responsibility for and what we expect them to do, and communicating that up front. So those that opt into wanting to be in your centre, like, knows what the rules are around the different pieces of, like, if you can feel yourself as a service with these parents putting all this stuff on you, that there's this instinct in you that's like, hold on a second, like, that's not actually our response. Like, and you're feeling, but you don't know how to have the conversation, and you didn't have it at the start because you weren't really clear yourself. Like, you kind of know, like, this is what I think. I think people know, even running services, like, what they're comfortable with and where their boundary gets crossed. And they're like, I'm not actually really comfortable with that. But you don't know how to have the conversation because you're like 6 months in or 1 year into, like, the parents being, and you're just like, and that's really hard to pull back on. Or maybe you just agreed to doing things and then you decided that maybe wasn't a good idea, or you're just kind of feeling confused. It's okay to have all that. You don't have to go in and try and fix all that. But what you do need to do is pay attention to that and pull up and kind of go, all right, now we know how we feel about all of this. Let's put some, and this is why probably one place is really good, like, let's put some policy and procedures and some strategy and some thinking into who we are, what we are comfortable being for these children, and what we are comfortable taking responsibility for, and what we believe is actually on the parents. And let's, put a really good...
And that whole, what you were just talking about earlier was having that boundary, right? But also when you were talking to a child who's having a moment, it's actually still sitting within that space, being clear, but also still being able to say, we can support this here. Like, we're not just going to say, no, we're not going to do anything, but the responsibility lies with the parent, but we support what you do. Is that sort of right? Is that...
Yeah. So, sorry, say that again. So with the parent.
So example is toilet training.
Yeah.
Right. So parent is the one responsible for the toilet training.
Yep.
But when they come to school or early learning each day, we support the practices the parents doing at home.
Yes.
And that would be part of that conversation, right? That would be part of...
Yeah, no, that's a great example, because it's making it clear to that parent, this is actually your responsibility, not ours, and we will work to support you, but you need to own this. Yeah. You cannot put the ownership of this onto us. And even if you could take it on as a service, I mean, for a service, it might even mean it's a little bit more tricky, because suddenly you've got, 20 kids whose parents toilet training, have different plans, but it's actually really important for those parents that they do. Like, parents really do, unfortunately, I need to say, like, step up the responsibility they need to be taking for their kids. And partly, I have compassion. I'm a working parent myself. It's because they're working, they're stressed. There's now 2 working families, financial pressures. But, like, if you did have children, they are your responsibility and they need to be in the equation. And they're the first things that get thrown under the bus. And we're seeing the consequences of that down the line. And I would say to parents, it might feel like you're buying yourself some time and energy by outsourcing this stuff with your young children who can't advocate for themselves and tell you properly that. But down the line, what that's going to cost you in terms of your time and energy, if you have a child that isn't okay, has some mental health, like, is going to be exponentially greater than what it would be right now for you to pull up and actually give this a little bit more of your time and attention, while it's actually not as much work as you think, because you have no idea what's coming down the line and how long that goes on for if you don't get these few years right.
And don't ask for that, and have that line at your service as well, right? So I would say most children these days are in some sort of care. So those educators, the team leaders, centre managers, having the conversation back with the families, that clear path that you said. And actually it leads on to the last part of our podcast, which is about, we ask all our guests this, looking forward. What are the big challenges the sector will face from your viewpoint? I mean, I think we've sort of covered them.
Yeah, it is all of this stuff. It is very much it is for me around really understanding what it is that children need and ensuring that things are being set up to meet those needs. And what's really unfortunate for the sector, and it's absolutely not the sector's fault, is that the government have stepped in with a whole bunch of like non-negotiable things that childcare centres have to do to tick the boxes. Like, I get that's about trying to ensure a quality education and care thing, but you know, we are quickly learning that all of the stuff that was around trying to teach kids how to, you know, read and write and like has actually harmed more children than letting them go outside and play with sticks for the day with their mates with supervision, but not like intense scheduling and intense, like that intense tick box scheduling that, you know, I know a lot of people have to do with kids because we have to make sure that we've done all the compliant, like we're doing all the things, and that's not actually centre's fault. That's like, I know there's government imposed changes that came down the line, and so it's really tricky to try and ensure that you're like meeting your legal requirements, like for the education and care of kids, well, you kind of know that those requirements are not in the interests of children and their development. It's like, that's the challenge of, you know, all of the different spaces that are speaking into this, who are not talking to each other, who are not working together, and these isolated decisions are getting made, and it's coming at the cost of children. You know, and that's probably the work I'm doing is, you know, I'm out there seeing this and going, people need, like, all of these different parties who are making decisions need to start talking to each other, because they're not, and these decisions are being made kind of in silo for economic reasons, or like for the wrong reason, not in the interest of the child.
Yeah, and they're also trying maybe to solve issues that are only a very small part of it.
Yep.
And they're applying it to the lower, applying it across the board, but in fact, it doesn't need to be
everyone. It's just a segment. It's true. It's like there's a segment of kids that are struggling who really need this. So we're just going to do that for everyone.
Everyone needs it.
No, and then it's just harmed 90% of kids for this 10% of kids that, yeah, I know. It's, I mean, that's what's happening in schools too.
Wonky.
It is. And so it is just having all these things and being imposed on you, seeing that children are actually really struggling and not actually having the agency to do much about it. I know it's,
no,
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned one place earlier, and I know, I mean, this is not, we're not advertising anything or doing anything here.
Yeah.
But I know some of a lot of services use paper still, but we're moving forward. We're transforming into a digital era.
Yeah.
And to actually be smart about what you're doing, think about other solutions. Think about helping those educators save that time, save that admin, gives them time, right? And we're talking, this whole thing is about how do we reduce time on other things to actually spend it with the most important thing we're doing is caring for children.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to say, like, I think this sector is really important. It's sad for me how not valued it is, and that's actually about children as much, like, it's because people just think it's babysitting children until they become economic contributors to society. Like, it's just getting through those years until they can be functional and useful to the economy. No one actually goes, like, those years are like the most critical years and they need to be protected, and we need to honour them, and we need to put a crap ton of resources into that, because if we get that right and we really support children properly to develop well in those early years, like, we will have flourishing adults who will but like we're just trying to, it's just wild to me
It's just like an elevator.
when
Throw them out to the side.
you go,
Yeah. Oh God, that was. I thought. Do you know what? I thought I had it on silent. Sorry, Lloyd.
everything is upside down. Like the entire thing is upside down in terms of what we prioritize. And again, I just go, we're just going to more and more see the consequences of that. Unfortunately, we just don't see the proper consequences of that in children yet. We see it further down the line with the high suicide rates and all of, the mental health crisis and all of this stuff that's happening for our kids. It's like, that's not happening because of they're 16. That started like it was the building blocks were like not put there. And like we're just seeing that there, but it's not, you don't get it. It's not like that's starting now. It's like that's been brewing.
Yeah, for years.
For years.
Yeah. Now I know we have such great conversations around this, and I know we've definitely run over time. So what I want to do as a last thing is just ask you for your wise words or a motivational quote that you use or you would like to share with our audience before we finish up.
Yeah. I do have a very simple quote. That's one of my favorites from a lady called Brene Brown. For anyone who's heard of her, go and check out her work. We love Brene. Yeah. Which is simply...
Brene Brown's fabulous.
Well, which is why I like it's clear is kind. So that's it. Just 3 words. Clear is kind. And yeah, I like to think that. I know that's true. Sometimes kind isn't easy, and sometimes kind is very hard to hear, but not leaving people in confusion and being clear is actually being clear with parents, knowing what the rules are and being clear with people, being clear with children, being clear with staff is kind. I don't know. Take that to mean whatever you want, but that is something that I kind of... Clear as kind.
I think I know I've certainly had some fun conversation today. It's certainly an interesting topic and one that's going to be, I'm sure, very much in the forefront over the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think we're going to see lots come. I worry a little bit about the next, 10 to 20 years. I think there's amazing kids coming out too who are more emotionally connected and developed, and I feel like there's going to be this group of kids who are that the healthiest humans we've nearly ever seen, and then on the extreme of that we're also going to see some stuff that we haven't seen before. It's going to be a mix of all of it. I think we've all just kind of been sitting in the middle. I think these divides are going to get bigger and bigger. We're also just going to see some really connected and great humans as well.
We're going to see some amazing stuff happen. I
think we're in interesting times.
There's a cost to that as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much, Sam. This has been fabulous to catch up with you. For our audience listening, we'll share all the links, all the information that Sam's talked about today, right from Teacher Tom, and I'll look into him a bit more as well. And look, thank you for your time. Appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
No worries. Thanks, Paula.
See you, Sam.
See ya.